When you think of the place of final punishment, of the ultimate destination for all cosmic rebellion, what do you truly see? For most of us, our spiritual imagination is haunted by a single, powerful and monolithic image, a lake of fire, a realm of eternal torment, a singular and final hell designed for the devil and his angels. This is the simple, terrifying, and theologically convenient geography of the afterlife that we have been given. It is a neat and tidy conclusion to the story of good and evil. But what if this picture is dangerously incomplete? What if I told you that long before the lake of fire was ever conceived as the final destination, another, more ancient and far more mysterious structure of incarceration already existed in the cosmos? A maximum security prison, a supernatural Alcatraz, a fortress of divine justice forged in the fires of a primordial war, designed not to punish the sins of fallen humanity, but to contain enemies far older, far more powerful, and of a completely different order of being. And what if I told you the most shocking truth of all? That this first cosmic prison was not designed by Satan as a kingdom to rule, but was forged by God himself as a cage to contain him, and that it was built in the unfathomable darkness of an age before Adam ever took his first breath. Today, we are not investigating a doctrine. We are launching a forensic investigation into a piece of forgotten cosmic architecture. We will unearth the lost blueprints of the abyss, the first and most mysterious prison in the universe. And in doing so, we will reveal a hidden truth about the history of divine justice, the nature of primordial rebellion, and the staggering sovereign foresight of a God who built a prison long before he ever planted a garden. Before we venture into the uncensored chronicles of the ancient world, our investigation must begin by establishing a crucial fact. The abyss is not a myth. It is not just a poetic metaphor for hell or a generic term for the underworld. Within the pages of the canonical Bible itself, the abyss is consistently described as a specific, distinct, and functional place of incarceration. The later gatekeepers may have obscured its origins and its history, but they could not completely erase its presence from the sacred text. The word most often translated as abyss or bottomless pit in our New Testaments comes from the Greek word abyssos. It literally means a place of immeasurable depth, a bottomless chasm. But in its biblical context, it is never used to describe a simple geographical feature. It is always a place of spiritual confinement. Consider the testimony of the Gospels. In Luke chapter 8, when Jesus confronts the legion of demons possessing the man from the Gerasenes, what is their greatest fear? They do not plead not to be destroyed. They plead with him not to command them to go out into the abyssos, into the abyss. For these demonic spirits, the abyss is a known and terrifying destination, a specific place of imprisonment that they are desperate to avoid. They would rather inhabit a herd of swine and be plunged into the sea than be sent back to this primordial prison. The Book of Revelation expands on this concept, treating the abyss not as an idea, but as a literal, physical place with a key. In chapter 9, the Apostle John sees a star fall from heaven, and to him is given the key to the shaft of the abyss. He opens it, and a plague of demonic locusts is released. Later, in chapter 20, John sees an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the abyss and a great chain. He seizes the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil and Satan, and binds him for 1,000 years, and throws him into the abyss, and shut it and sealed it over him. The language is precise and architectural. The abyss is a place that can be opened and shut. It has a shaft, it has a key, it can be sealed. This is not the language of metaphor. This is the language of a maximum security prison. The canonical scriptures themselves testify that a specific, lockable place of cosmic incarceration exists. But to understand who it was built for and when it was forged, we must turn to the witnesses who remember the first war. A prison is not built without a crime. A maximum security facility is not forged without a dangerous class of criminals to contain. To understand the origin and purpose of the abyss, we must therefore travel back in time, beyond the stories of Genesis, beyond the creation of Adam, to the scene of the very first crime in cosmic history. We must revisit the primordial catastrophe of the First Heavenly War. The canonical scriptures give us only brief, cryptic, and poetic glimpses into this event. The prophet Isaiah, in a taunt against the king of Babylon, speaks of a shining one, a son of the dawn, who sought to exalt his throne above the stars of God, and was subsequently cut down to the ground. The prophet Ezekiel, in an oracle against the king of Tyre, describes an anointed guardian cherub in the very garden of God, whose heart grew proud because of his beauty, and who was cast out of the holy mountain. And the book of Revelation gives us a flashback to this war, describing a great dragon, that ancient serpent, who was thrown down from heaven, and his angels were thrown down with him. These are the fragments, the shrapnel of a much larger suppressed history, a history of a civil war in the heavens, a mutiny led by one of the highest and most glorious beings in all of creation. This was not a small insurrection. Revelation's symbolic language suggests that a full third of the angelic host joined Lucifer in this rebellion. They made a conscious and eternal choice to reject the authority of their Creator and to wage war against his throne. The result was not a prolonged conflict, but a swift and decisive judgment. They were defeated and cast out. But cast out to where? While many of these fallen angels now operate as the principalities and powers in the heavenly realms, the ancient texts suggest that the original, most powerful leaders of this rebellion were immediately confined. They became the first prisoners of a war that had just begun. A crime of this magnitude, a rebellion of this scale, required more than a simple exile. It required a prison. It required a place of containment so secure, so absolute, so inescapable that it could hold beings of immense celestial power. And so, in the aftermath of this first great war, as a direct and immediate response to this first great act of cosmic treason, a new structure was forged in the universe. It was a prison built not for men, but for angels. It was the great and terrible abyss. While the canonical Bible gives us only fleeting glimpses of this primordial war and its aftermath, the Book of Enoch provides what can only be described as a direct eyewitness account. As we have seen, Enoch was not just a patriarch, he was a cosmic explorer, a man who was taken on a guided tour of the multi-layered universe. And a significant portion of his tour was a visit to the various penal colonies and detention centers of the celestial government. Enoch did not just hear about the divine judgment. He was shown the prisons. His testimony is crucial because it confirms that the concept of a celestial prison is not a singular, monolithic idea. He describes multiple, distinct places of confinement, each designed for a different class of spiritual criminal. This revelation of a complex, supernatural carceral system is one of the most shocking and systematically suppressed truths in all of sacred literature. Enoch's journey takes him to the place where the Watchers, the angels who sinned in his own generation, are bound. This is a place of gloomy darkness, a fiery and terrible abyss located in what he describes as the second heaven. This is the prison we have come to know, the one that the Apostle Peter explicitly references. But Enoch also describes another, even more terrifying and seemingly more ancient prison. In the 18th and 21st chapters of his book, he is taken to a desolate and chaotic place at the very ends of the earth, a place that is empty and terrible. And it is here that his angelic guide shows him the prison for the stars of heaven. This is a profound and important distinction. The Watchers are imprisoned as angels, but this first group of rebels, who are associated with Lucifer's primordial mutiny, are often symbolically described as stars that were cast down from heaven. Enoch sees these stars, these original high-ranking rebels, bound in this terrible place, burning like great mountains of fire. This is not the same prison as the one holding the Watchers. It appears to be a different facility, perhaps a more ancient one, a maximum security penitentiary designed for the first and most powerful traitors of the cosmic war. Enoch's testimony provides the first, direct, eyewitness evidence that the abyss, the great and terrible prison forged before Adam, is not a myth. It is a real, observable, and horrifyingly functional part of the cosmic architecture. Enoch's guided tour of the celestial penal system provides us with the single most important piece of evidence in our investigation. It reveals that the abyss is not a generic term for hell, but a specific, named facility, and it was created for a specific class of prisoner. The 18th chapter of Enoch is a detailed field report from this primordial penitentiary. He is taken to a place at the very edge of the created order, a place that is chaotic and horrible. He sees 7 stars of the heaven bound together in it like great mountains and burning with fire. His angelic guide then explains the nature of their crime. These are not the Watchers who sinned with human women. These are the stars of God which have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and are bound here till 10,000 years, the time entailed by their sins, are consummated. This is a description of the first and highest order of rebellion. These are likely the very leaders of Lucifer's original mutiny, the third of the stars that his tail swept from heaven. The location itself is described not as a spiritual state, but as a physical or quasi-physical reality. It is a place empty and terrible, a prison for the angels, a place where they are held in fiery chains. In the 21st chapter, he is taken to another similar place, a chaotic abyss of fire, and is told, "This place is the prison of the angels, and here they will be imprisoned forever." This is the forbidden history of the abyss. It was forged in the aftermath of the first great heavenly war. It was created by God Himself as an inescapable, maximum security facility to contain the most powerful and dangerous rebels from that primordial conflict. It was not created for humanity did not yet exist. It was not created for the Watchers, for their crime had not yet been committed. It was forged for the stars, the original high-ranking traitors who sought to usurp the very throne of God. The abyss is the oldest prison in the universe, a monument to the first and greatest act of cosmic treason. And its existence proves that divine justice has a history that is far older and far more terrible than the story of a garden and a forbidden fruit. This uncensored chronicle, which reveals the existence of multiple distinct celestial prisons, allows us to solve one of the most persistent theological puzzles in the New Testament. The scriptures seem to use several different terms for the place of angelic confinement: the abyss, chains of gloomy darkness, and a specific technical term used only once in the entire Bible: Tartarus. For centuries, these have often been treated as interchangeable poetic synonyms for hell. But with the fuller context from the Book of Enoch, we can now see that these are not synonyms. They are likely the names of different facilities within a complex celestial penal system. Let us examine the evidence with precision. The second letter of the Apostle Peter, chapter 2, verse 4, contains this unique and powerful word. In describing the fate of the angels who sinned, he writes that God did not spare them, but cast them down to Tartarus and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment. The word Peter chooses here, Tartarus, is not a random one. In Greek mythology, it was the name of the deepest and most secure pit of the underworld, a place reserved not for ordinary souls, but for the defeated Titans, the primordial divine beings who had rebelled against the Olympian gods. Peter is making a profound theological and cosmological statement. He is borrowing this specific technical term to describe the prison of a specific class of divine rebel. And given the context of his letter, which immediately goes on to speak of the flood and the days of Noah, it is almost certain that he is referring to the Watchers. Tartarus, therefore, is the specific name for the prison that Enoch saw in the second heaven, the facility that was created to hold the angelic mutineers of the second rebellion, the ones who had committed the sin of admixture with humanity. The abyss, on the other hand, as we have seen from Enoch and Revelation, is a different place. It is the primordial prison, the one forged for the stars who fell in the first Luciferian rebellion. This distinction is critical. It suggests a divine penal system with different levels of security and different facilities for different classes of criminal. The abyss is the ancient supermax penitentiary for the original cosmic traitors. Tartarus is the more recent specialized facility for the Watchers, the perpetrators of the great genetic crime. To fail to see this distinction is to miss the legal and architectural precision of God's justice. The idea of the abyss as a literal physical place of incarceration, a controllable facility within God's cosmic government, is not just a theory drawn from the Book of Enoch. It is a reality that is powerfully and repeatedly reinforced in the final book of the canonical Bible, the Book of Revelation. The language John the Revelator uses to describe the abyss is not the language of myth or metaphor. It is the language of architecture, of security, and of sovereign control. The most powerful symbol of this control is the key. A key implies a lock implies a door, and a door implies a structure, a facility with clear points of entry and exit, a place that can be opened and sealed by someone who holds the proper authority. The abyss is not an ungovernable chaos. It is a prison under the absolute and total control of the heavenly government. In the first chapter of Revelation, the resurrected and glorified Christ appears to John and makes a stunning declaration of his own authority. He says, "I am the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades." He is declaring his absolute victory over the domains of the dead. But this is not the only key mentioned in the book. In chapter 9, John sees a fallen star, an angelic being, to whom is given the key to the shaft of the abyss. This being is permitted by a higher authority to unlock the prison and release a plague of demonic locusts upon the earth for a limited time. This confirms that the abyss is not a self-contained entity. Its operations are subject to the permissive will of God. And most dramatically, in chapter 20, John sees another mighty angel descending from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the abyss and a great chain. This angel then seizes the ultimate rebel, the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and throws him into the abyss. And then he performs two specific architectural actions. He shut it and sealed it over him. You do not shut and seal a metaphor. You shut and seal a prison cell. This is the ultimate proof that the abyss is a real, functional, and controllable part of God's cosmic judicial system. And it leads to a final, shocking conclusion. Satan is not the king of hell. He is destined to become its most famous inmate. With the evidence from both the canonical and the uncensored texts now laid bare, the picture becomes clear. The biblical worldview, in its original and fullest form, presents a complex and multifaceted architecture of divine justice, with multiple specific places of incarceration for different classes of rebellious spiritual beings. And this brings us to the central question of our investigation. If this sophisticated and detailed cosmology is so clearly present in the ancient records, why was it systematically erased and replaced with a simple, monolithic, and ultimately misleading concept of a singular hell? The primary motive, as is so often the case with the great redactions of theological history, was the desire for a simplified afterlife. The gatekeepers of the new institutional Christianity, particularly after the time of Constantine, were engaged in a project of mass communication. They were trying to take a complex Hebraic faith and make it simple, rational, and easily digestible for a vast and often uneducated pagan audience. A complex penal system with multiple facilities like the Abyss and Tartarus, each with a different history and a different population, was a difficult and confusing concept to teach. It required a deep knowledge of the history of the cosmic wars, of the different angelic rebellions, and of the nuanced legal distinctions between them. It was theologically messy. A single fiery destination called hell, on the other hand, was a concept of brutal and brilliant simplicity. It created a clean, binary choice: heaven for the righteous, hell for the wicked. This was a powerful and effective tool for evangelism, for moral instruction, and for social control. It was easy to understand, easy to preach, and easy to use as both a threat and a promise. In their quest for a more efficient and marketable version of the faith, the gatekeepers made a fateful choice. They took the complex and detailed blueprints of the cosmic judicial system and replaced them with a simple, terrifying, and ultimately dumbed-down caricature. The desire for a simpler, more manageable afterlife was a powerful motive for the gatekeepers, but there was another, even deeper and more strategic reason for the suppression of this complex cosmic architecture. To acknowledge the existence of a prison that was forged by God before the creation of Adam is to acknowledge a truth that fundamentally undermines the entire, simplified, human-centric narrative of sin. The traditional redacted story is a neat and tidy drama. It begins with a perfect, pristine creation. There is no conflict, no rebellion, no sin. Then humanity, through the free will choice of Adam and Eve, introduces sin into this perfect world. In this model, sin is a purely human problem. It begins with us. and the entire story of the Bible becomes the story of God's response to our failure. But the existence of the abyss, a prison built in the aftermath of a primordial angelic war, shatters this narrative. It proves that sin, rebellion, and divine judgment have a history that is far older than humanity. It proves that the universe was already scarred by conflict, already divided into warring kingdoms, before Adam ever took his first breath. It means that God, in his divine foreknowledge, was already engaged in the work of administering cosmic justice long before he ever formed a man from the dust of the ground. This is a profoundly uncomfortable truth for a religious system that wants to place humanity at the center of the story. If God had already built a maximum security prison for angelic rebels before he even created us, it suggests that he knew that rebellion was not just a possibility, but a reality that had already occurred and would likely occur again. It points to a God whose sovereignty and foreknowledge are so absolute, so staggering, that it can be deeply unsettling to the human desire for a simpler, more reactive God. The gatekeepers had to erase the pre-Adamic context of the abyss because they had to erase the pre-Adamic context of sin itself. To preserve their simple story of a human-centric fall, they had to bury the evidence of the cosmic war that had preceded it. And the abyss was the single greatest and most permanent piece of architectural evidence of that war. The final act in this long and subtle campaign of censorship was not a single event, but a gradual and systematic transformation of the rich and complex vocabulary of the afterlife into a single, generic, and often misleading term. The ancient texts, as we have seen, speak with the precision of a legal and architectural blueprint about multiple, distinct locations of confinement. There is Sheol in Hebrew and Hades in Greek, the shadowy, neutral realm of the dead, where all souls, both righteous and wicked, awaited judgment. There is the specific high-security prison called Tartarus, a name borrowed from Greek cosmology to describe the specialized facility where the fallen watchers were being held. And then there is the great primordial abyssos, the abyss, the bottomless pit forged in the aftermath of the first cosmic war to contain the original angelic rebels. Each of these places had a specific name, a specific function, and a specific population. This was a complex and nuanced geography of the underworld, but over the centuries of theological simplification that followed the age of Constantine, these precise architectural terms were slowly and systematically collapsed into one all-encompassing and highly emotive image, the fiery pit of hell. This was a masterful act of narrative consolidation, a theological sleight of hand. It took a complex, multifaceted judicial system and replaced it with a single, terrifying, and universally applicable symbol of eternal punishment. This transformation was not just a matter of language, it was a fundamental shift in theology. By replacing the specific, legalistic concepts of incarceration, of judgment, and of different sentences for different cosmic crimes, with the more visceral and emotionally powerful image of a burning pit, the gatekeepers shifted the focus of the afterlife from a story of divine justice to a story of pure, unending torment. The idea of a structured cosmic penal system, a universe where God's response to rebellion was as precise and as ordered as his acts of creation, was lost. In its place, we were given a one-size-fits-all destination for all forms of rebellion, both human and angelic. They took a complex and sober-minded cosmology a geography that spoke of order even in punishment, and they turned it into a simple and terrifying horror story. It was undoubtedly a more powerful tool for controlling the masses through fear, but it came at the tremendous cost of erasing the intricate legal and architectural details that the original uncensored texts had so carefully preserved. They took a cosmic prison and turned it into a fiery pit. To rediscover the forbidden history of the abyss is to do more than just unearth a piece of forgotten cosmology. It is to fundamentally reframe our understanding of the character of God. The simplified, sanitized story that begins with a peaceful garden can inadvertently create the impression that sin and judgment were a surprise to God, an unforeseen human failure to which he was forced to react. But the existence of a maximum security prison, forged by God himself in a time before Adam, shatters this reactive and limited view of the divine nature. The truth of the abyss does not reveal a cruel or sadistic God. It reveals a God of staggering, absolute, and proactive justice. It reveals a God who is not just a creator of life, but a divine architect of order. He did not wait for rebellion to occur before considering its consequences. He understood the profound freedom he had granted to his created beings, and with that understanding, he also architected the necessary structures to contain the potential for that freedom to be misused. The forging of the abyss was not an act of anger, it was an act of sovereign wisdom. It was a declaration etched into the very fabric of the primordial universe that his creation would operate according to a non-negotiable principle. Order is sacred, and rebellion will have a place of containment, a place of consequence. Chaos would not be allowed to reign unchecked. This is a far cry from the often portrayed image of a God who is constantly reacting to the sins of his creatures. The God of the uncensored chronicle is a God who anticipates, a God who prepares, a God whose justice is not a reaction, but a foundational pillar of reality itself. The existence of the abyss is the ultimate testament to the fact that God is not just loving, and he is not just powerful. He is, in his very essence, a God of perfect and unshakable order, and he has built his universe with the necessary firewalls, the divine fail-safes, to ensure that while rebellion may be permitted for a season, it will never, ever be allowed to triumph in the end. The abyss is not just a relic of the primordial past, it is an active and terrifying player in the prophecies of the end times. The Book of Revelation confirms that this ancient prison is not a sealed tomb, but a place whose doors can and will be opened again for a specific divine purpose. The 9th chapter of Revelation provides a chilling and explicit account of this temporary release. The Apostle John, in his vision, sees a star fall from heaven, an angelic being who is given the key to the shaft of the abyss. This is not a random event, it is a permitted act, authorized by a higher power. When the shaft is opened, a great cloud of smoke billows out, darkening the sun and the air, and from the smoke, a plague is unleashed upon the earth. A horde of demonic locusts, beings of terrifying description with the power of scorpions. Their mission is precise and limited. They are not permitted to harm the grass of the earth or any green plant or any tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they are not given the power to kill, but only to torment for a period of 5 months. The leader of this demonic army, the text tells us, is the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon and in Greek is Apollyon, both meaning the destroyer. This is a stunning prophetic vision, and in light of our investigation, its meaning becomes crystal clear. John is witnessing the temporary parole of the very same primordial, non-human rebels who were imprisoned in the abyss after the first great cosmic war. For a brief and terrible season, these ancient prisoners will be released from their confinement to act as agents of God's judgment upon a rebellious and unrepentant world. This proves that the abyss is not just a story from the Book of Enoch. It is an integral part of the canonical biblical eschatology. It is a real place with real prisoners, and its role in the final act of human history has been foretold. The prison that was forged before Adam will have a direct and terrifying impact on the final generation of humanity. The role of the abyss in the final prophetic drama does not end with the plague of demonic locusts. After this temporary release, its gates are once again shut, only to be reopened for its most famous and most significant inmate. The 20th chapter of the Book of Revelation describes the great legal and military victory that follows the Battle of Armageddon. It is here that the ultimate architect of all cosmic rebellion, the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil and Satan, is finally apprehended. John sees a mighty angel descend from heaven, holding the very same instruments of divine justice that we have been investigating, the key to the abyss and a great chain. This angel seizes the dragon, binds him, and in an act of profound and climactic justice, threw him into the abyss and shut it and sealed it over him. This is the moment that the entire long and bloody history of cosmic rebellion comes full circle. The very first prison, the one that was forged in the aftermath of the First Great War to contain the original angelic rebels, now becomes the temporary holding cell for the commander-in-chief of that rebellion. For 1,000 years, the text tells us, Satan himself will be confined to this primordial penitentiary, his influence on the nations of the earth completely severed. This is a revelation of breathtaking theological symmetry. It is the ultimate expression of divine justice. The abyss, which has stood for eons as a silent monument to the consequences of the first rebellion, will now become the personal prison of the one who started it all. The war that began with the forging of a prison will see its penultimate chapter conclude with the great enemy being cast into that very same prison. It is a perfect and inescapable legal irony, a demonstration that the judicial systems of God are patient, but they are absolute. The arc of cosmic justice is long, but it bends inevitably back to the prison that was forged in the beginning. This uncensored architectural history of the abyss forces us to confront and dismantle one of the most pervasive and biblically unsupported myths in all of popular theology: the idea that Satan is the king of hell. This is an image that has been burned into our collective consciousness by centuries of art, poetry, and folklore. We picture the devil sitting on a fiery throne, pitchfork in hand, gleefully ruling over a kingdom of the damned, a dark mirror to God's kingdom in heaven. But this is a complete and utter fabrication. It is a lie that grants the enemy a status and an authority that the scriptures never, ever afford him. The Bible does not describe hell or the abyss as a kingdom to be ruled by Satan. It describes it as a prison to be inhabited by him. Let us be absolutely clear. Satan is not the warden of hell. He is its most famous future inmate. The abyss was not created for him to govern. It was forged by God to contain him and his fellow rebels. The lake of fire, the final destination for all cosmic rebellion, is not his throne room, it is his eternal sentence. This is a critical and empowering distinction. To see hell as Satan's kingdom is to inadvertently grant him a measure of sovereignty, to see him as a rival king with his own dark territory. This can create a sense of fear and a feeling of being caught between two competing cosmic superpowers. But to see the abyss and the lake of fire for what they truly are, prisons, divinely created facilities of incarceration, is to see the enemy in his proper biblical context. He is not a king. He is a criminal. He is not a sovereign. He is a traitor, a deposed ruler who has been tried, convicted, and is awaiting his final sentencing. He does not hold the keys to the prison. The resurrected Christ does. The abiblical and pagan idea of Satan as the king of hell is a myth that subtly elevates his status and diminishes the absolute, total, and unchallenged sovereignty of the one true King, Jesus Christ, who has already defeated him and holds the very keys to his future prison cell. The forbidden history of the abyss, from its primordial forging to its final prophetic role, is ultimately not a story about the power of evil. It is a story about the unshakable, architectural, and administrative order of God. It is a profound and sobering testament to a universe that is governed not by chaos, but by a precise and unwavering system of divine justice. The very existence of this ancient cosmic prison is a declaration written into the fabric of reality itself that rebellion has a limit. Chaos has a boundary, and evil, no matter how powerful or ancient, will not be allowed to unravel the good order of God's creation. The abyss stands as a permanent and terrifying monument to this principle. It is the ultimate firewall, the divine fail-safe, the architectural proof that the universe operates according to a non-negotiable moral and legal structure. This knowledge should not primarily inspire fear in the heart of the believer. It should inspire a profound and reverential awe. It reveals a God who is not just a loving Father, but a wise and sovereign King. A king who does not just react to problems, but who architects solutions in advance. A king whose justice is as foundational to his character as his mercy. To live with this understanding is to live with a deep and abiding sense of security, even in the midst of a chaotic and often terrifying world. It is to know that the forces of darkness, as real and as active as they may be, are not free-roaming agents of chaos. They are operating on a leash. They are subject to a higher law, a higher authority, and a final, inescapable judgment. The same God who forged a prison for the first rebels is the same God who holds the keys to that prison today. And while evil may be permitted its brief and terrible season, the final outcome of the cosmic war has never been in doubt. The house always wins because the house was built by a God of unshakable order. The story of the abyss and its celestial prisoners finds its ultimate and triumphant counterpoint in the story of the cross and the empty tomb. The work of Jesus Christ was not just a moral or spiritual victory, it was a cosmic, legal, and architectural one. He did not just defeat the idea of sin, he invaded and conquered the very structures of confinement that sin had created. The Apostle Peter, in his first epistle, gives us a glimpse into this profound mystery. He writes that Christ, after his crucifixion, went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey. While the exact nature of this proclamation is a matter of deep theological debate, the geography is clear. Christ, in his death and resurrection, entered the very realms of confinement. He walked into the heart of the enemy's territory, not as a victim, but as a conqueror. This is why the resurrected Christ can declare with absolute authority in the book of Revelation, "I have the keys of death and Hades." He has not just defeated the enemy, he has seized control of the enemy's infrastructure. He has taken possession of the very gates of the underworld. The implications of this are staggering. The abyss, that ancient and terrifying prison, may still hold its primordial inmates. Tartarus may still confine the fallen watchers, but their gates are no longer controlled by the forces of darkness. They are held in the hands of the victorious King. This means that for the believer, the power of these ancient prisons has been broken. We are no longer subject to their jurisdiction. Christ's victory was not just a pardon for our sins, it was a transfer of citizenship, a liberation from the kingdom of darkness and its entire judicial system, and an enrollment into a new kingdom where the prison gates have no claim on us. He did not just offer us a way out of the prison. He took the keys to the prison itself. To embrace this uncensored architectural history of the abyss is to be confronted with a sobering and mature reality. It is a call to move beyond a simplistic and often overly sentimental version of the faith. We are not just the beloved children of a benevolent Father. We are also the loyal subjects of a holy and just King. And the universe we inhabit is not just a beautiful garden. It is a magnificent and sometimes terrifying kingdom, a realm that is governed by unshakable laws and profound consequences. We serve a God of infinite love and mercy, a God who was willing to enter into our brokenness to redeem us. But we also serve a God who, in his perfect holiness and wisdom, forged a prison for rebellion before he ever planted a garden for fellowship. To hold these two truths in tension is to begin to understand the true, awesome, and multifaceted character of the God of the Bible. This knowledge should cultivate in us not a spirit of fear, but a spirit of profound and holy reverence. It should strip away any casual or flippant approach to our faith. It should remind us that sin is not a small mistake to be easily brushed aside. It is an act of cosmic treason, an allegiance with a rebellion that has a long and terrible history. And it should remind us that justice is not an abstract philosophical concept. It is an architectural reality, a foundational pillar of the very universe we inhabit. To live in this sobering reality is to live with a new level of spiritual awareness. It is to walk with a sense of the true stakes of our daily choices. It is to approach God not just with the intimacy of a child, but with the reverence and awe of a citizen standing before a great and holy King, a King whose love is as infinite as his justice is absolute. For centuries, the gatekeepers of tradition have presented us with a simplified and ultimately misleading map of the spiritual underworld. They took the complex and nuanced geography of the ancient texts and collapsed it into a single, fiery, and one-dimensional destination. The distinct realities of Sheol, the abyss, and Tartarus were all merged into the generic and often misunderstood category of hell. This was an act of profound theological censorship, a deliberate choice to trade complexity for a more convenient and controllable narrative. They took a sophisticated multi-facility cosmic penal system and replaced it with a simple, brutish torture chamber. This was not just an issue of translation, it was an issue of worldview. The uncensored underworld of the Bible is a place of law, of order, of different sentences for different crimes. It is a testament to a God of precise and unwavering justice. But the censored underworld of popular tradition is often a place of pure, chaotic torment, a narrative that, while frightening, lacks the sober-minded, legal and architectural reality of the original texts. By unsealing the Book of Enoch, by re-examining the precise language of the New Testament, and by daring to look at the forbidden history of the First Cosmic War, we have reclaimed the original map. We have restored the distinction between the different realms of confinement. We have seen that the universe is not just a two-story house with a heaven upstairs and a hell downstairs. It is a vast and complex cosmic city with palaces and gardens, but also with courthouses, holding cells, and maximum security prisons. To know this is to move beyond a cartoonish view of the afterlife and into a more mature, more detailed, and more biblically accurate understanding of the architecture of divine justice. And so our forensic investigation into the forgotten architecture of hell comes to a close. We began with a single provocative image from our chosen title, a prison forged by God before the time of Adam. We followed the trail of evidence from the cryptic references in the New Testament to the detailed eyewitness accounts in the Book of Enoch. We have distinguished between the different facilities of celestial confinement, separating the primordial abyss from the later prison of Tartarus. We have seen how this ancient prison was not just a historical footnote, but is an active and terrifying player in the prophecies of the end times. We have unmasked the motives of the gatekeepers who chose to simplify this complex reality, replacing a sophisticated cosmic judicial system with a simple, fiery pit. And in doing so, we have restored a more complete, more sober, and more awe-inspiring picture of the God we serve. He is not a God who reacts to sin, but a God who in his perfect sovereignty and foreknowledge architected the very structures of justice before the worlds were framed. The abyss is not just a frightening idea. It is a foundational piece of the grand architecture of divine justice, a testament to a universe that is built on a non-negotiable foundation of order and law. To understand its origin, its purpose, and its prophetic destiny is to understand that the justice of God is not an abstract concept, but a tangible, structural, and inescapable reality. The foundation of justice in our universe was not laid in the aftermath of Adam's sin. It was forged in the fires of a cosmic war, in a time before our own history began. The abyss, that ancient and terrifying prison, is the forgotten cornerstone of this foundation. Its existence is the unspoken truth that proves that order and consequence are not afterthoughts in God's design. They are primordial principles, as foundational to reality as light and gravity. The gatekeepers of tradition gave us a story that begins with a garden, a place of fellowship. But the uncensored chronicle, the one we have unearthed today, reveals a story that begins with a prison, a place of justice. We serve a God who understood the terrible potential of free will, and in his infinite wisdom, he architected a response to rebellion before he ever architected a home for innocence. The abyss is the forgotten evidence that the justice of God is not a reaction to our failure, but a reflection of his eternal and unchangeable nature. And so the final question we are left with is not one of fear, but of profound and holy awe. How does knowing that God established a system of divine incarceration for angelic rebellion long before he ever created humanity change the way you understand his holiness and his justice? Let us share our thoughts below.